Welcome to the Quantum Healing Oracle. This is a channel dedicated to using astrology and tarot to read the current collective energies and bring forward clarity and guidance that will help you live your most inspired and authentic life. My name's Pan, and if you're new here, please feel free to like and subscribe. Today we're going to continue and do part 2 of a 3-part video series on the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. I'll link the first video in the series in the description box. In the first video, I did kind of a deep dive into the mechanics of what Saturn-Neptune is showing us, how that part of our consciousness is becoming more available and understood. And in this video, we're going to take a look at the astrology more specifically and also give some more practical application for how to navigate the shifts in the energy that are occurring. And in the third video, we'll do a tarot reading that'll dive even deeper into the energies. So before we begin, please only take what resonates. These are my interpretation of the energies. Nothing's ever set in stone. You always have multiple paths to take at any given time, and it's ultimately up to you to choose the path that works best for you. So first, let's take a look at the astrology. So here's a tropical chart for Friday, February 20th. Here is the Saturn-Neptune conjunction happening at 1 degree in Aries. And if you saw part 1 of this video, I talked about how the outer planets represent the structure for the collective human consciousness. If you didn't watch that video, I would suggest that you go and check it out. And I talked more in depth about how Saturn represents how we make our reality feel real, the way we structure it through our perception, our choices, and our actions, and how Neptune represents the quantum field of all the different potentials and possibilities that we have access to. And so this conjunction that's happening at the 1st degree of Aries, you've probably heard, is called the world point. This is where the chart transitions from the end of the zodiac of being Pisces into the beginning of a new cycle of the zodiac being Aries. And Aries is individuation. It's about stepping out, taking the initiative, taking action and moving forward in a way that feels self-guided, that feels directed. Okay, so this is definitely a beginning point for the way that this energy is going to express itself moving forward. So what I find interesting about this transit is that Saturn and Neptune have been traveling in very close connection for the last 8 months or so. And they've just been slowly coming to meet the exact moment of this conjunction at the beginning of Aries. And so this energy has been building, and we probably all can kind of recognize how we experience it in our own life. But the way I would recommend that you find how this is impacting you directly is that you look at your natal chart and you see which house this 1st degree of Aries turns up in. For me, it's actually my 10th house, and so a lot of these shifts and a lot of this focus is happening through the way that I present myself in the world and what it is that I offer and how I am in service to bring my gifts into this world. But for each of you, it's going to be different. So if you can find which house this conjunction's happening, you can see where this energy may be focusing and bringing some clarity on what kind of shift and changes can be made. So what makes this conjunction so powerful is that it's been in this harmonious aspect with both Pluto and Uranus. And again, because all these outer planets move so slowly, this has been an ongoing transit that's been happening for the past few months. And because we have Uranus trining Pluto, and trine is a very harmonious way energy is flowing, and we have the sextiles happening between Pluto and Saturn-Neptune, and then Uranus and Saturn-Neptune. So this is a very harmonious movement of energy within the outer planets. And the outer planets being this structure of the human consciousness, of our collective consciousness. So how I interpret this is that what Pluto represents is it brings forward the potential and the energy that we're ready to integrate. Basically, Pluto is the threshold between the old self and the new self. And when new energy and new potential is ready to be activated, Pluto will create shifts and an opening in your life in order to allow that new energy and those new potentials to be made real and to become available. Okay? And Uranus is electric. The way I like to see Uranus is it's like how electricity powers a light bulb. The electricity is actually the energy that allows the light bulb to work. So Uranus functions literally as the energy that moves things forward. And that's why it can create breakthroughs, but it can also create disruption, because when it's time for that energy to be discharged, just like a lightning bolt, there's a lot of power and a lot of force that can move through that channel. And if that channel's clear, it can create powerful change in a productive way. And if that channel's not clear, it can create disruptive energy in order to allow that power to move forward. So I find it's very powerful to understand that that Neptunian power that's available is harmoniously aspecting Pluto, which is the new potential and the new energy that's being made available to integrate into our lives. And because that power is very harmoniously aspecting this Saturn-Neptune conjunction, it's showing that these shifts and changes that are being made when we understand quantum shifting and how our frequency is creating resonance that aligns with vibrations of reality, versions of reality. Okay? This is what goes into that whole transmission that I made in the previous video about becoming more consciously aware of how we're using our focus to choose frequencies that open up certain potentials and certain realities. And so this is just, I think, showing us that the new structure of our human consciousness is giving us more creative control over how we change reality, how we shift into reality. And the challenge here is that we have Jupiter that's been in this long-standing square with Chiron. And Chiron's all about kind of the unresolved wounds, the deep parts of ourself that haven't known how to surface and haven't known how to hold our own unique and authentic expression. And Jupiter kind of represents the beneficial expansion that things will take in order to bring that new harmony and the changes that are needed. So Jupiter in Cancer is a really powerful placement because it's very nurturing, it's very compassionate. And so this expansive energy that Jupiter's bringing is being challenged by the unresolved wounds and the parts of us that haven't learned how to hold space for our uniqueness yet. And how I've kind of come to understand Chiron is that because we're all designed in a very specific way, and that includes our challenges and our wounds. So a lot of times when we think back to childhood, we think back to our trauma, we're like, oh, but you know, this relationship with my parents or this situation when I was younger really messed me up. But I don't think that the overview of the soul sees it that way. I think it sees that the challenges that are created from traumatic experiences actually craft a very unique expression of being human. And that uniqueness can actually be utilized and turned into a service to the collective and kind of a superpower that only we can bring our unique gifts in that specific way. But it's been highlighted and shaped by the places that we've been hurt. And so I think Jupiter is applying pressure in kind of an uncomfortable way to show us that as we face these parts of ourselves we haven't integrated, what we're finding is that our journey and all those challenges and having so much self-acceptance and self-love for the uniqueness that we are, that is actually where we begin to show ourselves how to make these certain choices and shifts in our frequency that allow our reality to reflect our uniqueness. The shift in our reality will reflect the self-acceptance and the self-love that we have, and will shift more and more into a reality that not only holds space for our uniqueness, but it genuinely invites and wants our specific quality of what it is that we offer. So instead of looking at the world and trying to ask ourselves, who do I need to be in order to be successful in this world? That's kind of an old paradigm way of looking at it. The new paradigm way is, how can I shift into a reality that reflects the uniqueness that I have to offer? And that everything about myself, even the things that may be less than perfect, will fit perfectly into a reality and into a circumstance that is designed for that to work together. Okay, so I think those are the two main components that are here, is that it's showing us that the structure of consciousness itself is expanding and changing and growing in a way to bring more room and allow more room for our unique expression, so we feel the self-worth and the value of whatever it is that we bring to the table and have to offer. Okay, so the theme that I got for this transit is responsibility is leadership in the new world. That responsibility is leadership in the new world. And we're going to unpack that here. But first I want to go a little bit into the difference between external authority and internal authority. I've shared a little bit about this in some of my previous videos. But external authority is similar to, you know, when you're growing up and the parent kind of has the say as to what's happening with the development of the child. And the child's not necessarily making all of its own choices. And yet, then as the child matures, when they enter the world, then they shift into operating from a place of having internal authority, which is making their own decisions, what feels best for them. And so I'm framing this transit as being a shift in the collective energies, largely from operating in a very external authority-oriented way into a very internal authority-related way. And this can actually be seen through the human design. We're exiting out of a phase called the cross of planning. And in 2027, we're entering into a new phase, which is called the cross of the sleeping phoenix. If you don't know anything about human design, it's a oracular system that draws on the I Ching and astrology and gene keys. And it's kind of an evolved version of how the human being is open to receiving and giving and participating energetically in the collective. And it also shows the patterns within the collective. And so just as we have astrological ages, like we're talking about the shift into Aquarius, they chart these shifts that are about 400 years long. And this cross of planning, we've been in since about 1615. Okay, and what the cross of planning has been about is largely about developing communities, developing social support structures in order to allow civilization to be developed and to become stabilized and to grow. And so we can see when we look back at the last 400 years, the advances that we've made in our civilization because we focused on governmental structures and social structures and education and medicine and things like that. So this has all just been a part of that cycle, a part of that age. And what we're shifting into in the cross of the sleeping phoenix is all about individualism. It's all about bringing forth our unique capacity in order to share and contribute to the collective consciousness as a whole. So it's going from being more tribal, community-based, what does the tribe need, what does the community need, into a focus of what is my unique individual gift, what is my service, and how do I benefit and contribute to the whole of humanity. And that's why we're seeing and feeling such a dramatic shift in all of our older systems, because a lot of these systems that have served us for many, many years are no longer going to work in the same way as we move forward into this new energy coming in 2027. So we're kind of in this threshold period, in this in-between period. But that's why I'm drawing upon looking at the energy that in this cross of planning, external authority was important. We needed these externalized structures to hold our civilization and our society together and allow it to expand through that period of our evolution. But now that we're moving into this more individuated self-expression mode of being on the planet, we're looking at releasing some of those structures of external authority and stepping into our internal authority and really feeling and understanding what that really is. So when I was given the theme, responsibility is leadership in the new world, what that means, that's coming for the cross of the sleeping phoenix moving forward. How we understand responsibility and how we understand leadership is going to change. Now, if you were to take that and reverse that and say, in the old energy, in the cross of planning, leadership is responsibility. And this is what we've seen, is we've seen that our leaders and government officials and those externalized authority figures, they took the lead, they took the ability to be responsible for the people. And so when we had positive leaders, beneficial leaders, then all the people would prosper when they would all move in that way, operating in that way. But now we're reaching this point where we're looking at the system, and I think most of us are pretty disenchanted with the idea of saying that the leaders that we have are not being fully responsible in the way that we would like them to be. And that's why a lot of this social angst and a lot of this emotional discontent is coming to the surface, because we see that that system is no longer functioning the way it was designed to, but it's because we're ready to transition into a new system. So just very much so in that old energy where the leaders were supposed to be responsible for the people, where leadership was responsibility in that age, we're shifting that around to where now personal responsibility is leadership in the new world. And that means that the responsibility that we take in our own lives is bringing forward the leadership that's necessary as we move forward. So I'm going to pack that even a little bit more. So responsibility is simply the ability to respond. In the old energy, we took responsibility as maybe being responsible to take care of others, or what happened to others was somehow up to us. And I think that was an exploration for that time. But in my understanding, the literal meaning and where the power and responsibility lives is that it's your ability to respond every moment. And in my previous video, I talked about how when you draw out the frequency bandwidth of frequencies that we can choose, and this is choosing in our perception, in our choices, in our actions, we can choose and select frequencies that are on a spectrum. At one end, we have love, we have unity, we have inclusivity, and we have all the different parts working together. That's of a higher frequency. And on the other end, we have separation, we have fear, and we have the idea that differences are opposing one another and actually working against the system. Okay, so this is the broad range of spectrum that shows where our frequency is when we're shifting into a perception or taking an action. It can reflect the frequency on that spectrum. So when we talk about responsibility, that's what we're talking about, is that anytime any circumstance or situation arises, you have a choice as to what frequency that you respond to that situation with. And the more you can respond with love and understanding, compassion, uniqueness, individuality as fitting the overall whole, then that is of a higher frequency and connected more to love, and it genuinely just feels better. And whenever we have circumstances that pull us into separation and fear and blame and judgment and opposition towards differences, that's of a lower frequency. And so that's what we're seeing, that every moment we have this opportunity to respond with a frequency. And that frequency that we respond with is going to determine the trajectory of the path that we take in our own lives and the parallel reality that we can choose to shift into. Okay, so that's why at this time, it's important to look at what's happening in the world, and especially when we see things that we don't like and we see people doing things that we don't like, and just be able to examine in our own way how we're being pulled into that lower frequency of separation, because we're feeling so discontent with the leadership and with those that we feel are not in integrity. That is kind of pulling us to continue to reinforce the old energy. It's kind of like saying external authority tries to overcome external authority in order to maintain balance and create peace. It's like saying a country would go to war with another country to take out an evil dictator so there can be peace. You know, it's like one form of external authority overriding another form of external authority, and that somehow if we can override what we think is the negative thing, then we'll actually have something positive. And that's where I don't think that that's where our future and our evolution is trying to show us. Our future and our evolution is inviting us to turn that around and say, if I take responsibility to shift into a higher frequency in my now moment, then I'm going to contribute to more peace and love on the planet. And so we very much have the opportunity to respond to things that we don't like and things that may be out of balance. We can respond to those negative circumstances with a higher positive frequency. And I think that's our responsibility at this time, is to have more love, more compassion, more understanding, and hold more neutrality for that old energy. Because those that are in the old energy will continue to recycle, playing out the old energy, which is slowly kind of destroying itself. Or we can choose to step into the new energy and understand that we're just contributing to building a new energy on the planet. And so I think it's valuable to use our experiences at this time to gauge where our frequency response is, and always check in if you feel that you have the opportunity to shift into a higher frequency in response to what you're seeing in the world, or if you're being pulled into a lower frequency, because that's where the work is being done. And the reason why I feel like the responsibility is the leadership is because when we understand how to take responsibility for our frequency in those moments, then we're leading this movement into the new energy and into the new world. And therefore, we don't actually need to put a president in a position of power or external authority in order to make things better. We use our internal authority to align with the highest frequency available, and we shift and create more peace and love in the world, and we lead by example. And so I think that this shift into this new energy is going to be each person finding they have that power of their own personal responsibility and becoming the leaders of that higher frequency as we move into the new world. Now, the practical application behind this, I find, is that if there's any situation that's arising, especially the ones that trigger you, a lot of the political situations, a lot of the economic situations, ideas of the shadow government kind of situation, the best way I find to understand if we're in our personal responsibility or not is when you look at a certain situation and you ask if there's anything positive directly that you can do about that situation. Okay, so if you see a president making a decision that you don't agree with, in most cases, there's nothing that you can do in that moment to make that situation any different. And so what came through to me is to recognize when we're seeing these things and choices that other people may be making in that old energy, just say, that has nothing to do with me, because my business is about blank. And you can fill in the blank. Whatever you choose to be about is what you are here to do. It's where you're passionate, it's where your gifts are, it's where you can bring your highest frequency, your most authentic truth, and make the most impact in your life. Each person kind of has their own way of doing that. And so you have to look into your own life and be clear with yourself about what are the themes in your life that bring you to the point where you know what you're about and you're clear what you're about. Whether it be self-expression, whether it be about compassion, whether it be about bringing a certain inspired service or gift to share in the world. When we get really clear about what we're about, we can run all the other experiences by us and ask ourselves if that has anything to do with us or not. And if it doesn't, you can say that has nothing to do with me because my business is about blank and I'm going to get about my business. And so when we take that focus off the things that we can't control in an external authority way, we find that there are things that we can control through our internal authority, and that's taking personal responsibility for that higher frequency. And then we promote that and expand that more into the world. Okay, and this may seem like it's a small thing, but this is the most powerful way that we can affect the energy in our own lives. Because if we're constantly trying to overthrow external authority with external authority, we'll never punish enough bad guys to actually find the peace and love and personal power that we're looking for. That personal power, peace, and love is already within us right now. It's just waiting to be activated. And anything that would distract us or take us away from that mission is basically just pulling our awareness away from where our personal responsibility is. So if we look at a situation and we say, there is something that I can do about that feels positive, because my business is about this, then by all means, do it. You know, if it aligns in a way that allows you to bring that higher frequency and more peace and love into the world, you can certainly take action on any situation and circumstance in the world. But I'm only offering that as long as we continue to rebel against the external authority and the old energy, we're not able to fully access that personal responsibility and have the greatest impact and effect to create the world that we want. And I see that as being why this dynamic between the outer planets is so important and so powerful, because, like I said, this is a collective, this is a shift in how the structure of our collective consciousness works. And so once we really feel and begin to understand that this is this ability that we have, this is the power that we have, this is what we're here for, we'll just begin to focus more and more on what our business is and what we're here to do. And that's what brings me to this thing I was talking about with Jupiter and Chiron, is that it very much hinges on our uniqueness. It hinges on the things that we've healed in our own lives, because the things that we've healed in our own lives become a transmission and a service for others that are going through the same kind of thing. And I really see that as being where the compassion and where it blends these two realities together. Even though we kind of have this overlap right now between the old energy and the new energy, when you step into the new energy yourself and you realize what you've healed, you can always offer that back to the old energy. And you don't need to expect anybody to take it or anybody to listen, but you're a living beacon of that healed expression. And that usually comes forward in a unique way. It becomes who you authentically are. It's not something you have to learn to do or figure out how to do. That old energy was about, how do I find an identity to fit into my community? The new energy is about, how do I use my unique expression of individuality to promote the healing, the blessings, the service, and whatever it is that you're about at this time. And so, again, this transit's been building for a long time, and it's just reaching this kind of apex and culmination. But to me, it's just, this is a rippling under the surface of the collective consciousness now that this is available. And just like kind of how the 100th monkey theory works, that the more people that pick this idea up and run with it in their own lives, they're going to start to see this turn up more and more people are going to understand that that's how it works. And that as we each go forward in our own expression of unique personal responsibility, bringing as much love and light into this world as possible, then we'll just continue to see more and more of that in our external world. And so that's kind of how I connect the astrology of what's happening at this time to what we can actually do. But it does take an honest self-reflection and a genuine intention to respond to each moment with the highest frequency, the most loving, compassionate, inclusive understanding of how we're meant to be different. We're meant to have different kinds of people doing different kinds of things on the whole spectrum. And we're not always going to like or agree with what everybody else is doing, but we can see that those are all just different pieces of one whole system, and that all those differences do fit together. They only break down when we fall into fear and judgment, and we think that those differences are keeping something apart from us, but it's actually just ourselves keeping our energy apart from ourselves, or our personal power apart from ourselves. And so this shifting into a higher frequency is just a reunification with you, yourself, your authentic self, your personal power, your inspiration, your purpose, and your excitement, and whatever it is that you wish to share with this world. And the other thing I would suggest is just start small. Find small ways of making these shifts in your everyday life. And they start to build a momentum. They start to snowball until it becomes almost automatic that you can continue to shift into frequencies that align with that love and that compassion and that inclusivity. And that will also hold space for the people who haven't quite figured this out yet either. So that's all I have for today. I'll be back with another video, and we'll do the tarot reading tomorrow.